Dawn broke gently over the ancient oaks of Charleston, casting a soft rose hue across the weathered slate roof of the Whitmore estate. Inside a vast room veiled in sheer white curtains, Julian Whitmore stood silently before a floor-to-ceiling window. His eyes gazed toward the mist-draped cotton fields stretching to the horizon, but his mind was trapped, caught in the invisible chains that had long bound his fate. As the fourth-generation CEO of the Whitmore financial empire, Julian had been raised to believe that duty comes before desire. Every detail of his life had been carefully charted: his career, his behavior, even his marriage. In just a few weeks, he was expected to marry a woman chosen not for love, but for legacy, a merger of dynasties, not of hearts. Yet this morning, as golden sunlight crept across the floor and the scent of aged oak filled the air like memory, one truth pulsed inside him. He had to leave this place before he lost who he truly was. Julian closed the heavy door behind him, leaving the dark-paneled walls and solemn ancestral portraits to stand witness in silence. No goodbyes, no explanations. He booked the earliest flight to San Francisco under the pretense of scouting tech investments, a flawless excuse for a young CEO expected to expand the family's reach. But the only thing he truly sought was a crack in the walls, a breath of air, a place far enough for him to finally hear his own voice. Inside him, a storm brewed without a name, a longing for a life not scripted by legacy and bloodlines, a quiet hope that somewhere out there something real, something just for him, still existed. As the plane lifted off from Charleston, Julian didn't look back. Because he knew, if he gave himself even a second to hesitate, he might never find the strength to leave. The hotel lobby where Julian arrived gleamed with soft marble and gold-tinted lights, every inch crafted to exude control and prestige. But it was in this perfectly calculated space that he encountered the one thing no plan had accounted for. She sat quietly in the corner, not flashy, not loud, just a petite figure in a pale blue dress, clutching a blue folder to her chest as if it held her last thread of hope. Emily Rhodes. She glanced at her wristwatch, pressed her lips together, and took a deep, shaky breath. In her eyes, there was no pretense, no polished mask like the ones Julian had grown used to in the corporate world, only raw human vulnerability. He didn't know why he walked toward her, only that his feet felt guided by something beyond logic. "Waiting for an interview?" Julian asked, his voice low and warm, a polite smile playing on his lips. Emily startled, then smiled nervously. "Yes, I'm trying not to pass out." The honesty in her reply made him chuckle. They talked for a few minutes about work, about nothing in particular, no flirtation, no tactics, just a simple, accidental conversation. Yet somehow, both of their hearts shifted by a single beat. A few hours later, Emily was called for her interview. As she stepped out of the elevator, her breath caught, and Julian was just exiting the same meeting room. He said nothing, just offered a quiet smile, and in that moment his eyes spoke something gentle, something real, and Emily's world, just for a second, tilted out of its careful balance. The hotel lobby in downtown San Francisco was filled with suits, briefcases, and purpose. Julian had walked into 100 lobbies like this before, but today, the world seemed to move in slow motion. She sat quietly in a far corner, a soft blue dress, plain flats, and a blue folder pressed to her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. She took a deep breath, as if reminding herself not to fall apart. Julian paused. He didn't know why, but something about her pulled him in. She was unlike anyone from his world, not polished, not guarded, not rehearsed. Just Emily Rhodes, trying her best. He walked over, polite but not stiff. "The first time interviewing here." She looked up, slightly startled. "Yeah, trying not to come off as a total wreck." The honesty in her voice made him smile. Well, honesty is a good place to start. They talked for only a few minutes, nothing profound, but something quiet clicked, like the world had opened a small door neither of them expected. When he left, Julian went straight upstairs to find the project manager. "She's a perfect fit. I want Miss Rhodes hired." That afternoon, Julian saw Emily again at the coffee counter on the hotel's ground floor. She had just come out of her interview, her face still slightly flustered, but her eyes shimmered with hope. He leaned casually against the wooden counter, holding a cup of espresso, his eyes never leaving her. "So, you survived?" he asked, a small smile tugging at his lips. Emily laughed more than he expected. "I think so. They said they'll be in touch, but I'm not expecting much." Julian nodded, as if hiding a quiet secret behind his calm gaze. They exchanged a few more words before he politely wished her luck and walked away. 2 days later, Emily received the job offer. She was so stunned she dropped the cup in her hand. Somewhere in an office high above, Julian simply smiled, leaving no trace of his quiet intervention. A week later, they met again at an internal company event. Emily wore a simple black dress, her hair loosely tied, her presence still shy but undeniably gentle. They talked longer this time, about San Francisco, about how hard it was to wake up early, about a little bookstore she loved visiting on weekends. Julian listened, not hurriedly, not analytically, but as if every small story she told was something worth keeping. And beneath the soft golden lights, with gentle jazz playing in the background, something inside him quietly tilted. He had never felt this kind of calm before, and he began to fear that he might need her more than he was ever meant to. That evening, Julian invited Emily for a walk along Pier 39, where golden lights shimmered over the bay and the sea breeze carried the salty air of San Francisco through the night. The noise of the world faded behind them, leaving only the soft sound of footsteps, distant waves, and two people walking side by side, without needing many words. "Do you like this feeling?" Julian asked, his voice low and steady. Emily nodded. "I do. Here, I feel free, no one watching, no expectations." Julian turned slightly toward her, his gaze searching, as if trying to understand something buried deep. "Sometimes I feel like I was born to live someone else's life," he said. "Everything decided for me. I've learned how to be quiet, how to play the role, but never how to be me." Emily gave a faint smile. "I know that feeling. I've spent so long trying to fit into a shape others made for me. Sometimes I forget what I even want." Her words floated into the night breeze, gentle but full of truth, and something in that honesty made Julian pause. They stood by the railing, the vast ocean stretching out before them, and behind them the old world they were both trying to leave behind. No one spoke. They didn't have to. Julian leaned toward her slightly, his eyes searching hers, not demanding, just asking. Emily didn't step back. And in that moment, they touched, through a first kiss that was soft, hesitant, and unhurried, as if they were listening to each other's hearts instead of speaking. 2 nights after Pier 39, Emily received a message from Julian. "Tonight. Rooftop, no reason, just come." When the door to the rooftop opened, it felt like stepping into a moment carved out from the world. Candlelight flickered in the soft wind, strings of dim light stretched overhead, glinting off the red wine set on a small wooden table prepared with care. Julian stood there, not overly formal, sleeves rolled up, no tie, but his eyes were so gentle they softened something in her chest. "No one's ever set up a night like this for me," Emily said, smiling faintly. "And I've never wanted anyone here but you," he replied. They died in a silence that didn't need filling, as if every spoken word might shatter the stillness they both needed. After each glance, something grew. After each touch, a deeper quiet. When dinner ended, they stepped near the railing. The city below shimmered like words they hadn't dared to say. Emily turned to him, voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid it might break something fragile. "I've never truly loved anyone. Never belonged to anyone. Everything before was temporary. But tonight, I don't want temporary anymore." Julian didn't answer right away. He simply turned to her, placed a hand gently on her cheek, and looked into her eyes for a long, quiet moment. When they kissed, it wasn't rushed. It was the culmination of every shared silence, every soft word exchanged, every breath held between them. That night, they gave themselves to each other, not out of desire alone, but out of trust. A gentle surrender between two lonely souls who, at last, had found something real in a world too vast to hold on to anything. The next morning, Julian woke up alone. The space beside him was still warm but empty. The room was unnaturally quiet, as if the night before had never happened. He stepped out of bed and walked quickly toward the door. But there was only silence. No note, no sign, not even a reason, just the soft morning light slipping through the curtains and a hollow space in his chest he couldn't name. Julian waited. He stayed in that room all morning, then all afternoon. Every time there was a knock at the door, he hoped. But it was only housekeeping, wrong numbers, or the wind tapping the window. When the sun set, the truth settled like dust in his lungs. She was gone. And he hadn't even had the chance to hold on. The city of San Francisco seemed to fall into silence around him, leaving behind only an empty room and a question that burned quietly in his chest. Why? A few days later, he left San Francisco, carrying a suitcase and a heart that had just learned what love felt like, only to be left behind. On the flight back to Charleston, staring out through the narrow window, Julian whispered to himself, "Don't ever fall in love again." Nearly a month had passed since that fateful morning, since Emily disappeared from Julian's life without a single word. The days that followed blurred into endless meetings, elegant dinners that tasted like nothing, and mornings he awoke beside a space that kept growing, not just on the bed, but deep inside his chest. The engagement ceremony unfolded like a script passed down through generations. Everything was flawless, opulent, as if no cracks had ever formed in the world Julian had been born to carry. He wore the perfect suit, walked among the guests with the same composed face, but inside he felt hollow in ways he couldn't name. And then the doors opened, and time stopped. The woman who stepped in, draped in an ivory dress, her brown hair cascading gently over her shoulders, was none other than her. Emily. But not the Emily of San Francisco. Not the girl clutching a blue folder, nervous before her first big interview. She now walked as someone he no longer recognized, molded by duty, encased in silence. She walked not as Emily, but as Evelyn Rhodes. Their eyes met across a room full of applause and glasses clinking. But for them, the noise fell away. Only silence remained. Julian didn't speak. He simply stared at her, trying to distinguish dream from cruel theater. She looked back unguarded, unmasked, her eyes brimming with the weight of everything unsaid. And then, from trembling lips, a single question escaped, soft enough to tear everything left inside him. "Why didn't you tell me?" The music inside still played softly, but to Julian, it had become nothing more than a distant hum. He stood by the tall glass doors, watching Emily or Evelyn amid the glittering crowd. The same eyes, the same girl who once whispered to him beneath candlelight, but now she stood like a character in a story someone else had written. Unable to hold it in, he set down his glass and walked toward her. "Would you take a walk with me?" he asked, voice low but strangely calm. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded gently. They slipped through the doors and into the garden behind the estate, where golden lights danced through tree branches and the night air whispered like unfinished words. "Why?" Julian asked when they stopped beneath a canopy of bougainvillea. No anger, no blame, just the quiet ache of a man who had once loved and lost. Emily clasped her hands, her voice trembling. "That morning, I only meant to get coffee, but my family was already waiting. They took me away before I could reach anyone. I didn't know you were the one they chose, Julian. If I had..." Her voice broke. The tears came quietly. Julian said nothing, but his shoulders trembled. All the pain he'd carried that month, the questions, the bitterness, the sleepless nights, cracked open, revealing the softest, most vulnerable part of him. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Emily collapsed into him, sobbing as if she had finally been allowed to fall. "I believe you," Julian whispered against her ear, "and I'm tired, Emily, tired of fighting what I really feel." She held him tighter, and in the warmth of that embrace, nothing more needed to be said. They stood next to each other for a long time in the small garden under the dim lights of the unfinished party, when all words had fallen silent, leaving only a quiet full of meaning. No more anger, no more misunderstanding, only the truth, bare and sincere, and two people who had gone through so much just to be here, face to face. Julian gently took Emily's hand, not as a lover, not as someone who had been left behind, but as the man who was truly about to become her husband. "Maybe fate brought us together," he said softly, "but love, that's what we chose." Emily nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from fear or guilt. They were the tears of someone who was truly loved, the right way, by the right person, at the right time. They didn't cancel the engagement, but they refused to let it be a political arrangement. Instead, they held a private wedding on the Oregon coast, just a few real loved ones, a violin, salty wind, and vows spoken straight from the heart. No obligations, no duties, no watching eyes. Just the two of them, and a love that had survived every storm. After the wedding, they lived in a small house by the sea, painted white with large windows, an old fireplace, and the smell of toasted bread every morning. Julian left his position at the top of the family business, turning to writing simplified finance books. Emily taught at a small community library. Life was light like the wind, not flashy, but whole. And then one day, Emily found out she was pregnant. She cried in Julian's arms, tears of joy from someone who had gone far enough to finally come home to where she truly belonged. They named their daughter Nana, the symbol of a love not arranged, not calculated, not bowed to fate. And in the little wooden house by the vast ocean, where every wave was a gentle breath of life, they lived as if, at last, love had been given the chance to simply be itself. Months later, a gentle afternoon passed over the Oregon coast, where the little white house still stood as peacefully as the day they first arrived. In the soft golden glow of sunset, Julian sat by the wide window, gently rocking Nana to sleep. The little girl's eyelids fluttered as her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, holding her entire world in one quiet touch. Emily sat beside him, her gaze warm, her lips curled into a quiet smile, the smile of a woman who had walked through storms and now lived in the light of something beautifully simple. No music was needed, no audience to applaud, only the steady breath of a sleeping child and the unspoken harmony between two souls who had once lost each other, but had found their way back, for good. Their love didn't have to run, it only had to understand. It only had to believe in what remained, through everything. A gentle touch, a promise kept, and a heart brave enough to stay. This story ends not with drama, but with peace. Because sometimes love's greatest triumph isn't in the passion or the chase. It's in choosing again and again to stay.